Greetings, everyone. This is Ayman Tarabishi, Deputy Chair of the Department of Management at the George Washington University and also ICSB Executive Director. With me here today for this ICSB Exchange webinar is Mr. Ahmed Osman, the President of the International Council for Small Business. Greetings, Mr. Ahmed. How are you?
Hello, Ayman. Good evening. How are you?
Doing well. How's Cairo? How's everybody in Cairo? And how are you doing?
Everything is good. Everything is much better than before, and we're going back to normal life very soon, I hope.
Well, glad. We have a busy ICSB Exchange webinar here, and they're becoming very popular, and a lot of people are listening to them here, and especially when we put them on YouTube here. So we have a lot to cover. You have a presentation to make and a conversation to have, and then from there, I will ask you some follow-up questions, and then we'll open up for all the attendees to ask some more questions. And then at the end, we're going to have more of an open conversation about ICSB, about the World Congress, and then next steps and next ideas. So we have a full agenda here. Why don't we go ahead and start? I know we had some technical issues here, so I'm going to be driving the slides for you. You just tell me next, and I'll move the slides for you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening to all of ICSB members worldwide and non-members, obviously. It is a privilege and honor to be with you tonight and to share with you some of my, let's say, insights or predictions on what's going to happen to MSMEs globally post COVID-19, I hope. So I think what is very important to mention that lots of people are talking about the new normal post COVID-19, and I think all of the new normal, let's say, work or analysis is mere speculation. I want to bring in a new angle or dimension here, which is basically, I myself am a small business owner. I'm not a researcher, I'm not an academic, and I'm not a policymaker. I own a business. I've been affected, obviously, as a business from what's happened during this unprecedented recession or standstill or pause to life. So what these tips or the things I want to bring forward are basically tips I want to bring into small business owners worldwide, what I learned, what I think we should be ready for if this ever happens again, and I hope it doesn't happen. So I'll go forward with the presentation. Next slide, please, Ayman. So just as an introduction, obviously we were all living in a world which was fast-paced. Everyone was focusing on what he was doing day to day, whether in terms of business, in terms of life, in terms of family. And I think this crisis has brought us all to a pause and a standstill, which we were never, ever expecting. And I think this crisis, basically the outbreak of COVID-19 has affected, let's say, millions or billions of people worldwide. So we have millions of cases of infection, and millions of people going to hospital, unfortunately thousands of deaths. And I think the general public are being advised, obviously, of new regulations and new, let's say, tips for the lifestyle in terms of social distancing, wash your hands, basic things which people were brought up to do, but with life going on, they stopped doing. And I think the global economy has never seen anything like this. It's gone into a huge recession. It's gone into free fall. Maybe few economies in the world have escaped the trap of going into this depression. And obviously, a lot of us as citizens have gone into modes of like panic buying in shops and stocking up food, stocking up alcohol supplies and sanitizers, etc. So obviously, with what has happened, no one really knows what tomorrow holds. Obviously, lots of economists and scholars worldwide are writing about lots of predictions. People are talking about social distancing becoming the new normal. People talking about restaurants and bars having the 1.5 meter social distancing criteria between tables and the others. People talking about airlines actually operating at social distancing. So I assume that would be all riding in a business class style thing in the future. And I really think, you know, from my perspective, that this is, yes, good analysis, good insights. However, you know, human beings forget quickly, and they don't really stick to what they've learned through a crisis. And when you're in a war situation or something similar, you always panic and you always plan for next. And when life goes back to normal, a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months later, everything is back to square one. However, as a business or as a small business even, you know, we have been affected and hit hard in a lot of things. Lots of people have gone from X amount of dollars of revenue to zero revenue. Others have had to pay reduced pay to lots of employees, etc. So next slide, please. So people have gone into this mode of, you know, let's get back to basics. Let's worry about the basic things in life. Let's worry about paying our bills, paying our dues, paying our home installments, mortgages, etc. And even the luxury of seeing close family and friends has become something we worry about. You do it with caution. Obviously, lots of people have lost jobs. Lots of people have had pay cuts. And obviously, lots of people have become unwell because of this virus. So what's important now is we have all been trying to stay at home to support our healthcare providers globally. And I'd like to salute all doctors and nurses and the medical professionals working worldwide for what they've done for the humanity. I think something which will be remembered for a long time. And yet again, we still have to do a lot of work in terms of R&D in facing such a situation. Next slide, please. So I think what we should be looking at is what's going to happen after this coronavirus. Are we going to go back to become a normal society, as I think, or are we going to change in terms of how we work? Are we going to become more compassionate towards one another? Are businesses going to really have a purpose and cause and not just, you know, sell anything to anyone at no real quality or value? I think it should not take a major crisis for governments now to really think about how they protect the low-paid employees, or actually the people who with no pay at all. We've seen lots of schemes in governments globally, whether in the West or even in my country here, Egypt, where we've been putting schemes to support, let's say, casual labor, low-income paid groups. And I think what we've learned out of this, that really these people need some sort of social protection. And it's also a good example of what we've done, because everyone's staying at home. Obviously, we've seen a huge reduction in carbon emissions globally, which is something favorable out of this crisis. Next slide, please. So I think what we need to do as governments and as society is, after this pandemic is over, we're hearing a lot of things about, you know, these nationalist, you know, I'd like to say they're petty nationalist, you know, slogans. It's me and my country only, and it's not the world. I care about myself and my society. The world doesn't operate this way in 2020. We've seen that something which starts out of China has hit hard the whole world, from the US to Australia to Japan to the Middle East, etc. So I think this needs a collective, you know, action. There needs to be some sort of global action where we all look at what we can learn out of this crisis in terms of businesses and industries and healthcare, and obviously climate change, because of obviously climate change has caused this pandemic to explode in a way. Next slide, please. So I have a few questions I'd like to answer. First of all, how can we imagine a new dawn for micro, small, and medium enterprises globally? Second thing is, how can we imagine purposeful and meaningful startups? The third thing is, how will we work in the future? The fourth thing, what can MSMEs learn from this pandemic, and what is the new normal for MSMEs? Obviously, small and medium enterprises globally have had a sort of, you know, entrepreneurship, if I may say, was a fashion in a way. Everyone wanted to be an entrepreneur. Everyone thought starting and driving a business is something you can do very easily. I'd like to disagree that starting and actually managing a business is quite a difficult venture. It's stressful, it's painful. You get to these points in a month where at the end of the month you have to pay salaries, and you really can't do it, and you really are stressed. And it stresses you as a person, as a business owner. It stresses the people surrounding you as a family. So I think what we should learn out of this is that you need to have a certain skill set and a certain attitude and to start a business. It's not all roses. It's not all easy. Lots of young people think that being entrepreneurship is cool, if I may say. It's not that cool, and this crisis has proven it. And obviously, I'd like to relate to some statistics from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, GEM, where they say that 8 out of 10 startups globally failed. that means that you have a 20% success rate to start a business. So I'm not discouraging people from starting their own businesses. However, I want them to think about it meaningfully. Obviously, another piece of information which is quite important is the average age of a successful founder is around 38 years old. What does that mean? It means you can, yes, graduate from college or university or school and start a business, but you will not have the chances of succeeding if you have some years of experience under your belt. Next slide, please. So I've looked at 5 key factors I think every MSME or startup needs to keep in mind post this COVID-19 crisis. The first one is, next slide, please. Financial assessment and security. Next slide. So one of the most important concerns for a business, be it big or small, is financial stability, okay? Obviously, in terms of MSMEs, especially micro businesses, they don't have the luxury of going through complicated business models and business plan, etc. It's obviously sometimes a cash in, cash out situation is their operational mode. So it's important for us currently to stop and look at, assess what your business is going through financially under current circumstances. Obviously there'll be cash flow deficits. Obviously, governments globally have granted MSMEs certain rescue loans. These loans will have an interest to be paid. Some of them are low interests in some countries, and some of them are in the normal interest bracket. Obviously, it's very, I advise lots of startups to do like a financial health check. You can sit down with your chartered accountant, financial advisor if you have it, or even a knowledgeable friend to understand deficits, to understand future inflows of funds, potential expenses, potential liabilities, and let's say focus more on a 3 to 6 month action plan. So if we assume we're near the middle of 2020, we need to have a financial action plan for the next 6 months of the year. At this point, getting reliable and accurate information about government relief packages and financial support initiatives will be clear. Obviously, we hear lots of news, lots of headlines. No one knows how these things will be implemented. However, I think within the next 3 to 6 months, everything will be clear. Once this financial assessment has been done, I think it's very important for any business to have a execution plan through a support ecosystem. This may involve deciding on potential pay cuts. Some people have already, companies have done this initially. Others will stop investing in expansion plans such as infrastructure. Others will stop new recruits. I think what's very important for startups once they do this financial health check, and for SMEs, is they need to effectively communicate this plan and put it into action. Communicate it to your staff, communicate it to your shareholders, your investors if you have them, and communicate it to your stakeholders, suppliers, etc. Next slide, please. The second most important thing is to reevaluate your business plan. Next slide. So based on the financial health check, which happened previously, the risks and the revival strategy put in place, it's important to reevaluate your business plan, to assess the current situation, to redefine business goals and plan a more realistic and let's say more tangible or reachable growth plan. So lots of people have found out that their mode of business does not work right. Their delivery method of their goods or services is not the correct way. Others have made use of this crisis to use online methods of service delivery, marketing, etc. to the max. I think at this point, it's very, very realistic to look at your growth plan and to put your, let's say, growth targets or scalability targets to your stakeholders, investors, etc., on a realistic track. Others might find that their business is not sustainable and think if they close down or paused what they're doing now, they'll stop it forever and find something else to do. So this may be a 3 to 6 month plan or actually annual growth plan, depending on the company's current financial situation, and may include accelerating funds of, let's say, investment from investors, accelerating private equity funding, or even forming new collaborations between other businesses, partnering with others who do the same thing. To do things, and then we can see that. I think I can hear background noise. Ayman, can you please mute all the participants? Sorry. Okay. Next slide, please. So the third thing is to create a strong digital ecosystem. Next slide. I think what we've learned from this crisis is that we all have to become more digitally enabled. I think lots of families staying at home now are seeing their children learn online. We're seeing lots of entrepreneurs and businesses attend webinars similar to this one. Can we go back one slide, please, Ayman? Thank you. So I think what's important is for any micro, small, and medium enterprise is to become empowered digitally. I think digital transforming our companies onto digital platforms is not a luxury anymore. It's very important. Some companies have made use of it through using digital marketing and digital media, through social media, blogs, websites, etc., and generating new businesses through these channels. And it's very important for brands, especially those on the retail side, to make some benefits out of going online. I think apart from online sales, a consistent and positive social media presence is a good magnet for consumers and stakeholders. And we as ICSB have made use of this digital, let's say, revolution through this COVID-19. And Ayman has been very innovative in creating new products for ICSB, similar to the exchange webinars, the happy hours, arranging online conferences, etc. The second thing about the digital enabling is similar to the online learning I mentioned earlier, is to have an internal ecosystem that can accommodate remote working and working from home scenarios, without obviously compromising things such as data security and productivity of employees. But I think a lot of micro and small medium enterprises think that investing in a digital, let's say ERP or enterprise resource plan or a thing of this similar nature is an expensive investment. I have researched at least 22, let's say, free solutions that provide open source software for startups. And I encourage different, government agencies supporting MSMEs to subscribe into these portals and these services on behalf of MSMEs to get them technology transformed as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. Obviously, the next term is the fourth industrial revolution. We've been hearing about this term for the last 2 to 3 years of how the businesses will change, the future of work is going to be disrupted, etc. I think now we've embraced this change very quickly. My country, Egypt, for example, had a digital transformation plan planned ahead 2 to 3 years ago. And I think what has happened during this 2-month crisis is it's accelerated a lot of the digital transformation on the education side very quickly. And I hope that this will also be affecting the government services side as well as the business management side. So apart from being present and accessible on the digital platform, it's time to leverage new technologies and adopt this revolution. As I said, MSMEs think it's a huge investment and it has a higher ROI if it's on the long run, being automation, ERP, CRM, Internet of Things. But I think this plan has to be put in place and has to be accelerated as quickly as possible. And this is where governments, as I said, can come in and subsidize and support such schemes of digitally transforming companies and the way the financial technology works, etc. Next slide, please. So this crisis has led us to think that businesses, whatever type they are, can rely on less physical space and assets. Next slide. So what companies have learned is that remote working can be efficient and productive, okay? And working from home can be an acceptable form of employment, with team meetings taking place online or physically offline, happening less frequently, maybe as once a week, for example. Obviously, lots of people are now reconsidering the amount of space they utilize for their businesses. We're seeing schools now teaching online. We're seeing shops, supermarkets selling online, let's say, a good proportion of their goods and services. So this will lead to I think a crisis for office spaces and the investments into them, as well as things like shopping malls. Obviously, the reduction in your space for your business, whether it's an office space or a shop, a retail space, will lead to less overhead costs, such as security, utility bills, insurance, etc. And this movement to online shopping has meant that the future of shopping malls and high street shops is going towards more decline. We're already seen in the last 5 to 6 years, lots of big names on the high street retailers are closing down because of the shift to online shopping. So I think most of us, once we're out of this deadlock, will go back to a different type of office. As the health concerns continue, I think what we used to have in term architects called open office trends will be more closed offices because of the issues surrounding healthcare and let's say social distancing, etc. And I think this will lead to the reversal of the open office trend. We'll have more closed cubicles. Next, please. So I think for years, the amount of privacy allocated to a person in office has been steadily decreasing as companies adopted a more loathed and hated by some employees office plan. I've seen in the outsourcing and call center industry, people being given spaces as little as 80 to 90 centimeters for desk space, which basically has a computer screen and a telephone set on their desks. I think now what's going to happen is they will have the same space, but they will have a cubicle empty in between them if we still don't find a solution for this COVID-19. So people will want more space, yes, but obviously businesses can afford to let off a lot of space because of what we're seeing in terms of remote working. So I think we're going to see a pattern of less physical investment in spaces, office furniture, utilities, etc. Less investment in shops. We've seen concepts being adopted in countries such as Germany, where you have stores operating under to present a different, a certain product during the daytime, like a cafe, and then after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it changes into something else because people don't drink coffee after 4 p.m. So I hope that these innovative approaches to space management and space utilization continue. Next slide, please. I think what's important for every business, however big or small it is to have a crisis management strategy or a business continuity plan in a way. Next. So if we, next slide, please. If we take lessons from the current crisis, I think it's very, very effective to have a business continuity plan or a crisis management plan into place. And it can be as simple as having a financial backup. You know, some businesses, whenever they have returns, they spend them on expansion, etc. Now it's time to hold some cash reserves for companies. I think it's good for companies to invest in having a digital enabled, let's say, support ecosystem. And this can ensure minimum damage to the productivity happening at the workplace. And while most of businesses are prepared for internal simple crises such as fire and theft, etc., with certain insurance policies, also we need to have a business revival plan back in place. So if we look at major things like airlines now, I don't know how they're gonna, first of all, most of them have stopped. Now to go back to their normal operations, let's say pre-COVID in January 2020, is gonna take some time for travel to pick up. So even on a scale of a small or micro business, we need to have a sort of recovery plan. Things will not go back to normal initially or easily. However, with innovative marketing ideas, innovative service delivery methods, I think we have to keep in mind, we have to be flexible in our approaches to paying people for their time instead of for their days, for their months. And I think it's very important for us to manage cash wisely as businesses in the next period. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, I have a few thoughts and recommendations that I think small business owners can let's say make use of in the post-COVID era, hopefully very soon. Next slide. So we have a number of questions. So the first thing is this crisis has brought out, let's say, the human side or the humane side of things, if I may use the word humane, adopted by Ayman Tarabishi and Kishan Kim for humane entrepreneurship. So a good question to answer is, how did you as a business or as a person help during this pandemic? So quantify what you did for your employees. Did you pay them? Did you not pay them? Did you pay? Did you deliver goods to your customers as needed? Did you serve your community in a way? Did you give back to our healthcare providers? How did you serve as a citizen during this pandemic, or as a business owner to your employees, customers, community, and country? The second thing is identify stakeholders who will help tell your story in the months ahead. So if you have, as a business, done something nice or something you feel was good and you're proud of it, let people talk about it, document it, use it as promotional material going forward. Lots of teachers in schools are doing great things. Lots of healthcare workers, lots of businesses are giving free coffee, free everything to healthcare workers. This is something obviously very, very good today, but it's something to be proud of in the post-COVID era. The next thing is leverage this opportunity to build a better business. So sometimes when people build businesses, they just get carried away with day-to-day operations and never think of strategy and growth, etc., because they can't afford to think about these things. I think now it's more important to become more disruption resilient, if I may say. So these, again, going back to technology, mobile working, teleworking, cloud. Let's say if you have data which is important, have it secured, have it your systems are secure against hacking, things like that. Look at your supply chains. Maybe supply chains for your small or tiny business were disrupted, okay? So how can we mitigate these supply chain disruptions? Should we have different supply chain scenarios? A scenario A of, yes, if everything is normal, this is what we do. If something goes wrong with certain elements in our supply chain, what do I do? The third thing is have credible solutions to the next new major challenge, okay? So we've been through this pandemic. It is, I hope, once in a lifetime thing, but what if it happens again? What can we do to grow employment and increase the resilience of our company? And what can we do as a business to save money? I think what we're going to be facing is a much smarter, a much dollar holding back consumer. Every customer now will go back after this pandemic and not really spend left, right, and center as we had imagined. He will become very wise in his spending patterns because people have been hit with pay cuts, others with unemployment, and others were lucky enough to survive, but they don't want to go through this cycle again. So I think what we're going to see is a lot of people going towards saving, and businesses should do the same. However, you're going to be in front of a much tougher consumer to, let's say, sell to, okay? If it's possible for businesses, we should think of diversifying revenue streams. So if you're selling X products, sell X plus Y if it's possible, because if X stops, you have a Y to consider. Risk management, it sounds like a big word for micro and small businesses, but it's no longer a luxury. We need to register risks, have a risk register, identify risks with high impact, medium impact, low impact, and then quantify them in terms of adverse effects and try to mitigate against them where possible. The fourth point is prepare to engage reformers on the systematic failures exposed. So the 21st century safety nets need to look alike, and how do we pay for them? How do we enable inclusive growth that leverages and helps focus on market forces? I think what's important is for us to consider that, are we really a purposeful business? Do we provide value? Do we provide quality? Do we provide the, let's say, correctly priced products? I know of industries and markets in different countries of the world where you produce for X and sell for 3X. I think moving forward, we need to look at, I'm not looking at a socialist type of approach or a capitalist type of approach, but I think we need to be more humane in terms of how we sell our products and services to people. The last point is we should think globally and act locally. So again, we're not saying this is it, we need to be, the US has to be alone, China has to be alone, Egypt, etc., France. No, we think we need to diversify supply chains optionally while we defend global trade and global engagements in general. So if we had been producing certain goods and services through certain global supply chains, as I mentioned earlier, we need to diversify these, and because some of them might be disrupted for things like this pandemic, for any political issues, for any, let's say, environmental issues. So we need to do these in a correct manner. And finally, we need to support global institutions who have gone through this challenge with us. I think the WHO whatever people think are doing a good job, given the resources, given the, let's say, the law enforcement. They cannot enforce things over countries. They try to do things in the best way, and I think we should support it. I think it's time now to also consider that medical insurance is a global thing. We should not have it for more developed countries rather than less developed countries. I think pandemics and diseases travel globally very, very quickly, and I think to protect the more fortunate and more developed countries from these pandemics, I think a universal healthcare blanket needs to be put in place. So next slide, please. Obviously, some of these measures might be viewed by micro and small and medium enterprises as additional costs or additional time in an already tight financial situation. Already lots of startups are cash strapped, but I think the measures above are vital for survival and an effective bounce back for businesses, and while keeping the long-term growth and planning in mind. And I'd like to end this, Ayman, by saying that, you know, the struggle we're all in today is developing the strength we all need for tomorrow, and we shouldn't ever give up. And hopefully we'll get a more promising and more purposeful MSMEs and startups in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Very excellent presentation. A lot of content to cover and a lot of content to digest here. So let me ask some questions here. And I'd like to ask some difficult questions right off the bat because I can. I'm the moderator here. So let's be frank here. Things are not going to be normal again. We all know this. Everybody's saying this. But are things going to get better or are they going to get worse in your term? What do you think?
Okay, I'm not a fortune teller, but I'll tell you what I think. I think you have two types of people: people who will adopt this new normal, and I'd like to use a word mentioned by a dear friend who said that we had something called pre-9/11 and post-9/11 in the US, right? And I think in certain parts of the world, like where I'm from, everything will go back to normal very, very quickly because we forget very quickly, and we want to live life in the normal way we're used to. So we always have these two extremes: people who are going to go by the book and by social distancing and all the COVID, let's say, induced measures, and others which will basically go back to life. In developing countries, especially where people cannot afford to do lots of these precautionary measures, their jobs or actually working, essential working, necessity entrepreneurship in some areas are some things people cannot afford to go back to go to a new normal, which will affect their day-to-day living. So you'll find these two cases, Ayman. Someone like you will always be cautious and always take care of himself and stay 1.5 meters away from everyone. And someone like me who's going to see you and give you a big hug.
Okay, that's fully noted here. So I'll just start to run before I see you. But let me take it a little bit more here. You talked a little bit about work in the beginning, yes. And we saw it with airlines, we saw it with hotel rooms, we saw it with many, even work. We saw that people were compacting each other more, yes. And more. Let's try to get more seats on a plane. Let's get more desks in office. Let's get more, smaller hotel rooms, right? And smaller. Now, what this is telling us here, this is going to end very fast. People want their space. People want their safety and security. And it's a mindset. It's not just a physical limitation. It's a mindset limitation, people saying, I'm not accepting this. I need more space. This changes the rules on everything. So let's start with that. You mentioned it, which is something phenomenal here. How do you see this translating in terms of financials, in terms of bottom line?
So let's look at the airline example. If we have an average aircraft which carries 300 passengers and they're all stacked in coach class or economy class, and now we have to see a 1.5 meter social distancing rule applies. This means that this 300 passenger airline will travel with 100 passengers instead of 300. Obviously, how much the cost per seat will cost, we don't know. It should be 3 times more because the airlines have to make money and make profits. Obviously, now with prices of oil going down, there's something to offset that. But do you imagine that airlines will continue to fly with it one third full? I'm not sure. I don't think it's feasible for some airlines, especially in Europe and in North America. You have these lots of low-cost airlines, which basically they stack people in, and that's their business model. Okay, so I don't know. We're reading about things like countries asking for you to have this certain tests before you travel. You have temperature check in airports currently in China, but this new normal will affect airline businesses hugely, similar to the tourism industry, hotels. What they're saying now in lots of these forums online about the hotel industry is that you'll occupy a room and then they'll have it empty for 7 days after someone has left for it to be disinfected or something like this. Obviously, the World Health Organization, certain international organizations supporting travel and tourism need to set these guidelines globally. In terms of small businesses, it's going to be another game because they will go down to local governments, how they implement things. If you have a small corner restaurant in Italy or in Cairo or in Paris, which already has 6 tables and let's say 24 seats, how can you have it only accept half the amount of customers? It's going to basically affect you in terms of businesses, and it's going to affect, in terms of business revenue, and it's going to affect you also in terms of everything. So the new normal is something we need to all measure. My country here, for example, has decided to relax the lockdown aspects in a way because they think the economic cost is going to be very hard to recover very quickly, and that's why they're trying to keep this balance between health and economy in a way. It's difficult to manage, but this is the cost of society. I've seen Italy in a 6-week now lockdown, and for the Italian economy to recover is going to be a long way to go back. So I think what we need to do is, yes, we need the new normal, as you mentioned, but we also need to be sensitive that businesses and the economy has to also function as quickly as possible.
Let me ask another question and we'll open it up here. Let's talk about education, okay? Mm-hmm. In the United States, in Europe, and all over the world, and in the past, where it was used to be saying, to get an excellent education, you have to have excellent premises. You have to have a state-of-the-art buildings, state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art faculty, best faculty, and you have to have this experience of being on campus. That's how it used to be for years. And then online came as an extra superfluous, hey, this is interesting online, something to add on. It's an add-on to the education that's on campus. Well, within 4 weeks, everything turned upside down. Now education is all mostly online, and going on campus, which will eventually happen for the experience and the life experience of it, but it will never be the same again, right? Now you have young kids, they're about to go to college, or soon they'll be going to college. As a parent, as a small business owner, as a person leading an organization like this, how do you see universities and education moving forward?
It's a very good question, Ayman. I've seen that the online learning has basically switched on very quickly, and people have adopted it because they have to. Okay, there was no other option for education delivery, whether at schools or universities, except going online. Some institutions have done it very, very, let's say, smartly and swiftly. Others have struggled to convert to online. But at the end of the day, this was a situation we had to all face, and we had to basically go online. Obviously, my kids, for example, I have a 16 and a 12-year-old. They're doing online classes. My 16-year-old is doing them while lying in bed. Really, it's not the way you should learn, okay? But at the end of the day, they're missing out from the social aspects of school, seeing friends, engaging with them, doing sports, doing different activities, music, etc. There are lots of things they're missing out because they have to go through this lockdown. So what I see in the future is, yes, we don't need fancy buildings. I think we're going to go towards a more hybrid formula of basically delivering some tuition and some instruction online and others offline. So you have a mix of both. I'd like to say that with the online delivery of education and of research and knowledge, similar to the excellent exercise you've done a couple of weeks ago with our dear friend, Dr. Alex Noble at San Diego State, you converted the California Educators Conference into an online platform. which is basically, instead of reaching 150 to 200 people who had to fly out to California and attend, has reached 1,100 people, and most of them in developing countries who could not really afford to be there and actually listen to the excellent presentations and discussions. So in terms of education, I see a hybrid formula going forward. In terms of educational space, we will need, because it's going to be hybrid, we'll need less space, more efficient spaces. But I still see that the physical element of seeing your colleagues and friends at school and university, a big part of campus life, which no one can miss.
Let me ask you this question, and I'm going to give you a scenario here. Maybe it's not you, but in general. In the past, typically, if you live the executive lifestyle, or if you're running a company or executive lifestyle, what you would do is you would wake up early in the morning, get ready, take the kids to school or have them ready, get in the car, drive, be stuck in traffic for an hour or an hour and a half to get to the office by 9:30 to start your whole day's meeting, and then stay late at night all the way to catch, and you come back home. That was the used to be across many countries, including Egypt, including everybody else. Let me give you a new scenario. You wake up in the morning, you don't have to go to the office. You don't have to go to the store. You don't have to go. You do all your meetings from 9 to 12 at home, using all the technologies available. Then you go in the afternoon or early afternoon for other meetings or face-to-face interactions. And then you come back home early to finish up whatever you need. Is this the new future?
Well, this is again the hybrid future, like the part online, part offline. Obviously, some businesses, it can work this way. I mean, if you're providing education, if you're providing services. But if let's imagine that me and you have a small industrial manufacturing thing. We're producing, let's say, cans. We're producing boxes. Okay, how can we produce but while working from home? It's not going to work very much for industry. If we're into agriculture, how can we grow crops while staying at home? You know, some businesses it can work because you're providing a service, and others it will not work. Obviously, it all comes back to the business you're in. For me as a person, I'd like to go out every day, see friends, see colleagues, interact with people, because this is the way I've been working for the last 20 years, and I don't want it to change. Maybe in the next generation with my kids, this is how they will learn to work. They'll go to work 4 hours a day and work from home the other 4 hours, and then enjoy life on Zoom. So I don't know how it's gonna, but for me and for you, I think you've been teaching your online MBA for the last 2 to 3 years. You've been teaching your classes physically for many, many years. Which do you prefer, Ayman?
You know, pros and cons to each. I definitely like the on-campus experience because you get to actually see the students as well. But I like the expediency and right to the point of online, where you get to the topic very fast, or you're going to lose the audience very fast on class. So there's pros and cons of each. As you said, it becomes a combination of both. But let me continue this conversation with supply chain. You raised the issue, so I'm going to ask you a question here. What we're seeing now in the world is that a lot of people are questioning the supply chains, okay? Mm-hmm. The supply chain is problematic everywhere. Are you going to see a trend where a lot of countries are going to try to bring these supply chains back in-house? So for Cairo, more pharmaceuticals, more this, more that. We're saying, yes, it might be less expensive or easier to do it outside, but we can't do this anymore. We cannot afford a repeat of this. And is that new opportunities for starting new businesses then?
I think what we're going to see is more, let's say, I cannot say local supply chains, because of a lot of things going through these supply chains are, let's say, raw materials which have to come from abroad. But we can see more regional supply chains, more, let's say, economic blocks being created from different countries. We have a huge opportunity here in the African continent, for example, where we have countries which have minerals and natural resources. Others have agricultural resources. Others have ports. Others have energy. If they integrate in some sort of economic blocks, they can create these sort of regional supply chains. However, what has led us to having global supply chains was basically economies of scales and costs, and importing things from China to my country here in Egypt. Although we're miles apart, they still are cheaper than producing them locally. And at the end of the day, businesses are driven by profits and by costs. So I think what should happen is we should see a more, let's say, flexible supply chains. You can bring things from there, A, B, and C. You'll have alternatives, and you'll have regional supply chains in continents. And I hope that this, pandemic brings lots of local or regional groups together even closer. We, for example, as a country, we've seen a rise in exports of, let's say, protective equipment and masks and things like that to countries which we've never reached before, just because of this pandemic. Hopefully now this will open up new channels of business between different countries.
We had a question here, and let me open up the question here. I'm not sure if you see it here, but it's a question from our colleague from Kenya, Moses, here. He goes, good presentation, Ahmed. Given that Africa is an emerging market, how can MSMEs prepare for the fourth industrial revolution, given that most of them are suspicious of this new revolution of sorts, aren't prepared to adapt to it, and also just can't afford it? What do you think?
Thank you for the question, Moses. I think what's always keeping us as Africans behind anyone else is we always look at everything with suspicion. We always have this conspiracy theory in mind. But let's look at it in a pragmatic sense. We have the people, we have the resources. What we need now is the technology and the will to basically have an impact on how the fourth industrial revolution will work. We will have lots of work to do in terms of educating ourselves, educating young people to believe actually in Africa. We've seen millions of excellent calibers from Africa basically being, let's say, pushed away from the continent and going to live abroad because they can see a better future and a more stable one. The amount of investment in African startups last year is only equal to that, the investments in a country like Spain. Just imagine. So that means there's lots of potential for more investments to come into African startups, but they have to actually deliver quality goods and services and lots of things, because at the end of the day, it's about, a business is about producing something which makes sense, which has a good value and has a market. So I think let's put the suspicions and conspiracy theories aside and work for a better future for Africa, because I know and everyone knows that Africa is the upcoming economic power in the world.
So let me switch now the conversation a little bit, and I'm going to open up for more questions here. But today, ICSB made an announcement that we are postponing our World Congress from 2020 to 2021. And you sent out an email that went out to everybody here. So maybe explain the rationale for this postponement to 2021 in Paris, and how do you see the future of ICSB with the World Congress moving to Paris for 2021?
Okay, excellent question. So, Ayman, obviously we've been through this discussion as the ICSB 2020 Organizing Committee and our local partners in Paris. We had a number of conference calls assessing the situation, but obviously now coming to April 30th and let's say the end of this pandemic is not really, we cannot see where we're going. I think we made the correct and let's say hard situation of postponing our annual meeting to next July in 2021 in Paris. Obviously, this will give us, our local hosts, more time to assess the situation. Obviously, traveling, and you've sent us lots of correspondences of universities stopping and banning international travel for the next 3 to 4 months globally. So I think it was not an easy decision to make, because basically we are used to this annual gathering once a year. However, we have to make it for the safety and security of our members, first of all, and also because we do not want to put organizing such a big event into risk. And this obviously means that our 2022, which was the 21 Washington meetup, will be postponed by a year as well. So hopefully this is the correct decision we've made collectively, and I hope we all gather together in 2021 in Paris very soon.
So when the pandemic started here, we ICSB pushed very fast to go digital. We started the ICSB Exchange. We started the ICSB Toolbox. We joined the California conference, and we did a digital conference. We were about to launch a special certificate on where to play with Dr. Mark Gruber, and we're about to announce a special certificate with the United Nations, and hopefully ILO will also be joining us with this. So do you see that organizations like ICSB and other ones have a major role to play digitally? And what's the vision for you on this?
I think what we've agreed upon based on the work of different committees in the last 2 years, the ICSB 2020 Visioning Committee and 2030 Visioning Committee, is that we have to basically reach out to all our members through different products of services, which will basically make our members happy. Okay, so we used to have, let's say, certificates which were presented physically in the US or around the World Congresses. They were expensive. They were very limited to people who could travel and afford to do it. Going digitally is not, an invention. We adopted things because of the situation, but we had to do it anyway to reach out to our members. Obviously, Ayman, you can recall that last summer I had a very good trip to our chapter or affiliate in Indonesia, and we have over 1,000 members there who basically are making good use of all these online, let's say, the online content being created in last period. And I hope you've done a very good webinar early this week in Spanish, and I hope we see them happening in many, many other languages very soon. So this digital transformation of ICSB because of COVID-19 is something favorable, and we should continue with in the future, because also new generations are, let's say, more digitally literate. So they, obviously ICSB is a 65-year-old organization with lots of people who are, let's say, in the older age bracket, but now we can basically address a younger population or not a younger constituents of new members in ICSB. Ayman, I can see a question here on the chat from Merit in Cairo. Can I answer it?
Go ahead, yes.
So Merit disagrees that some opening some economies very fast and us being not ready to get back to normal. This is the largest recession since the Great Depression, and hence all economies are tied to the global economy and will suffer hardest. And how do you assess how SMEs will fare? And have you looked at the latest outlook from the IMF on global growth prospects? SMEs will fare in their own way. SMEs are, I don't like to look at them as one group. I'd like to look at them as many children, many small businesses. They all adopt to change and to policies and to, let's say, different issues in a different way. We can't all group them in one group. So small and medium enterprises in Egypt, some of them have suffered very, very hardly because of what we're going through, and others have thrived. And I have a friend running a microfinance company in Egypt, Amr Abul Azma, who's on our board, has mentioned that they're getting more, let's say, loan requests because of basically some of them because of they have issues to address in terms of suffering, and others want to expand because they can, let's say, produce more and sell more because the circumstances have helped them, especially if they're in the food industry, for example, selling stocks, etc., to people in this. So Merit, my answer, I'm not an economist like you, but my answer from a practitioner point of view will be that some SMEs will suffer and die, others will thrive. And it's just like having 2 or 3 babies around you. One of them will enjoy the lockdown, another will be depressed, and the third will be doing TikTok videos and enjoying life. So we cannot really look at them. In terms of growth prospects, yes, the global economy has all, let's say, crashed. Egypt is saying they will get a positive 2%, I think, growth outlook this year. I doubt it. But some countries are not looking at any growth and others are looking at depressions. So I see that basically we will, the growth prospects over the globe over the next 2 to 3 years will be very, 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 very tough. The tough measures are going to face us. And next, access to credit remains the largest challenge. Yes, it is a challenge, and it's going to be even more tougher to get credit in the next future. Also, VCs investing, some of them have decided to invest more in their companies to save them from crashing. Others have said, no, I'm not going to put in any money. So it's an unclear scenario. We're all speculating and we're all, let's say, analyzing the situation in a way. It's premature. It's just like history is being written. We need to reflect on what history has written 6 months down the line. Ayman.
One more question, and I'll ask it here just to move forward here with it. And you talked a lot about the different aspects of SMEs here. what is the job of the government in Egypt and in other countries to help SMEs? What type of things? Yesterday we had Sharu talk about Tibet, which is a government initiative. How do you see government can play a role in supporting?
So I will tell you what I always think, and I'll tell you what I think now. Okay, what I always think is the less government, the better, from a business owner's perspective. Okay, because basically, and I think I spoke about this a couple of years ago in Washington, and Winslow Sargent was laughing. You know, governments, they sit in rooms, lawmakers, policymakers, etc., and they draft things which think are good for business, and sometimes they really affect us in terms of more taxes, more whatever, and at the end we suffer as business owners. But again, coming to this pandemic has shown that some governments have reacted very favorably in supporting, let's say, unemployed people and supporting small businesses. So I would change my old opinion about the less government, the better is, let's say, the relationship with government has to be a balanced one. Yes, governments need taxation from businesses, businesses create jobs, etc. But at the end of the day, sometimes they bail out huge sectors of the economy like tourism in Egypt, etc. So I think there needs to be this, let's say, balanced, mutually beneficial relationship between both sides.
Okay, point well taken. I'll share your comments to the colleague here. And as usually, I like to end the webinar and ask you to put your final thoughts, your final feelings, your thoughts from your heart and not from your mind about the future of SMEs, the new dawn of SMEs, and how you see this moving forward.
So I'm normally optimistic, and you know that. And I normally, wherever the situation is, I think we should come out of it stronger and better and smiling. And I see that Winslow is laughing now, which is great. But I think the new dawn for SMEs is, let me phrase it in a way that prior to the COVID situation, we were getting lots of startups and SMEs, which really didn't make sense to me as a person. But you know, you'd find them very famous on social media platforms. You'd find the founders of these businesses excellent presenters and appearing in different, let's say, events and conferences talking about their success stories. But when you go in and dig deep into this business, you find that the revenue side is zero sometimes, but they're good in branding and showcasing what they do. I think now it's time for the meaningful, let's say, sustainable businesses, okay? And sustainable is financial sustainability and also looking at this planet in a way in terms of how sustainable they can be. So I think if I can state it in a blunt way, I think we're gonna cut a lot of crap going forward and going to really look at hard businesses which really deliver goods and services. And actually, I think this pandemic is going to basically be very, very positive for future MSMEs worldwide. I think the current situation is very, very tough, but out of these tough situations are born great things.
Good. I think you captured the heart of the element here. And we want to wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much for all your hard work with ICSB, and hopefully things will get better soon, and we see you soon as well. We don't know when, but I hope to see you soon. You want to talk a little bit about your plans of the ICSB Egypt conference coming up, and maybe send an invitation to everybody?
Yes, I think two things I need to mention at the end, Ayman. First of all is we've launched, I think back in March, our ICSB knowledge hubs, yes. And I think a lot of our members are going to see a lot of information coming out very soon about the different certificates going to be provided locally in different countries through these ICSB knowledge hubs. Also, we have our sixth edition of the Egypt Entrepreneurship Summit, this November in Aswan. Hopefully things will be much better and we'll see a lot of our members flying over to come to the beautiful city of Aswan in the south of Egypt. I know you've not been there, and I hope to see you there. And I hope that, you know, this is over very quickly. I'm fed up.
I think we're all there. We're all getting close to saying we had to do this, but I think now patience is prudence here. And with that, I want to thank you again for coming today and for the webinar, for the ICSB Exchange webinar. For everybody that's attending, we don't have any webinars for tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday, and we're going to take it easy. But we have some exciting news. So if you have joined this webinar, please, you have received our emails. We have a big list of webinars next week, including Google will be joining ICSB on May 6th to talk about how they can support SMEs with their tools available online for free for SMEs. And then following that, I am now proud to announce that we are launching a certificate, a special certificate with the United Nations, and in collaboration, UNCTAD from the United Nations and ILO, Decent Jobs for Youth. They'll be collaborating with us on this on May 7, 8, and 9 on how to teach and use the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in your classroom, in your office, and in your life. So be ready. We're going to have a very busy next week with many different activities. And also, we're going to have another webinar on humane entrepreneurship that was mentioned here. We're going to have part 2 it, and as we continue. Ahmed, I want to thank you. I did not know that Winslow is here. So Winslow, thank you very much for joining. And everybody stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Ahmed. Bye-bye.
Yalla, thanks a lot, Ayman. Thank you. Good night. Bye.